any material. We did bring some of our outreach materials and put them on the back table. If you know of any neighbors that might be interested in our updates, our best management practices document. So we've got those available.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And also, and there's written agendas and site updates by the.
Driving the light after
It's wet.
it's your fault.
It's-
I walked around.
It's okay.
Yeah.
This is
No, I
in
walked.
my pocket and it tends to get scrunched in there and.
Oh, okay.
All that.
I was saying, you don't leave a water run check for this maybe.
It's called smashing grass.
It was still going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't.
Yeah.
We all listen.
Yeah.
No problem. Okay, good.
It was
Needs
long.
cars for that. She could show up on her motorcycle.
One day.
Okay, so we're gonna go to Sabrina, just for big picture site-wide updates, and then we'll segue into who you want and then from there.
Right. So one of the big things that we've heard over a while now, and it's sort of multi-agency, multi-programmatic, is about trying to not silo, and that idea of there are other issues in the community. The diesel plume and grove, for example, Aaron had brought up the manganese issue and Boone drinking water, that's a little further away. But one of the issues that's really important to EPA nationwide is lead, and finding out how to collaborate better on lead issues, because there are so many places that lead comes from. And so many sources of lead that EPA isn't able to address. And so there's a lead collaboration pilot that is being worked on across the nation. And I volunteered Colorado Smelter whenever there's been collaborations. We have something similar going on with HUD with our sites and trying to identify HUD properties. In this particular case with lead, we're working on a collaboration with other agencies, bringing in state, local health department, federal, and looking at what is it that we can do to help people identify sources of lead, or just get educated and help them address sources of lead. So Jennifer Harrison, who was a community involvement coordinator on the site for quite a time, is the convener. Every region has a convener on this lead collaboration, and we'd like to bring her to the October meeting to talk about what she's trying to do. Here in Pueblo, there's some Denver area sites that she's helping work on too, and just look at, what can we do beyond Superfund regulation. And so I kind of wanted to, if we have any time, we could talk about any ideas that you have to help combat lead paint. We know that we've got, most of our homes are pre-1978 in the study area. So we've got exterior paint, interior paint, possible lead service lines that we're trying to figure out. Sources of lead possibly from cooking supplies, pottery, people may cook in still, jewelry that they wear that children might suck on if it's hanging around the mother's neck. That's some of the ways that we see elevated blood lead in little ones. So just the goal being better outcomes, because we know that there are multiple sources of lead in communities, but we can't address all of them just by doing soil cleanups or doing damp dusting and HEPA vacuuming with our dust cleanups. So she'd like to come in, and I just wanted to gauge folks' interest in that, and she could go into more detail in October on that. But hopefully we can get some ideas from you all, and see if there's big questions that we want to try to line up. We can talk about a few tonight, or as people think of things, get your questions to Ryan or to steering committee members, and then Jennifer could help frame her presentation around those sorts of questions. And she'd also be giving an update about meeting with state folks and others at EPA, different programs, because we have children's health programs, we have enforcement for things like renovating right, various parts of state and federal and local agencies that we want to try to bring to this collaboration.
So I guess one question is there anything that anyone would really like to hear about in particular, or any questions just for Jennifer before she comes over, is there anything of particular interest?
Was there a lead meeting between EPA and HUD? Not too long ago, and if there was there any results from that?
No, I don't think that anything specific out of that. So the recent HUD collaboration was really focused on the multifamily
Oh.
units. And the only, like in our study area, the only HUD multifamily unit that we still have to sample was the Minnequa apartments. And those were added to the study area last September. So that's something that we're working on sampling here with PWT pretty soon.
And that's here at the park?
Yeah.
That's-
Just south of the
Reunión.
park.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the only one we did not visit, so we went and knocked on all of those. Not
Yeah.
good outcome. Not good people,
No, just people not interested?
Yeah.
Okay.
not answering the doors, open the window, look at you, close the window, and got yelled at.
Was it you, not?
You with me? So that could have been. Understood. Yeah. I was probably, sorry about that, that was easy.
Aaron, when you said you were knocking on those when the PWT was it lead focused? Is that what-
Yes, yeah, we're offering blood lead testing to the HUD, to the people that live in the HUD homes.
And Pueblo Housing Authority homes too, right?
This is the list that I have. I went through that list.
That's what you meant.
Yeah, I thought that Jennifer had a meeting with someone in HUD to talk about the grant that you guys received and how the money got sent back, so I know that that's ongoing conversation. I don't have any outcomes from it, but I wanted to know, I know she's pursuing that further to see if there's something they can do or like to elevate it further, something where that has been really
Yeah.
frustrating.
Well, and maybe that could be shared with Jennifer in terms of something that is of interest and.
I think that would be maybe part of Jennifer's larger conversation about how they're trying to talk with these various agencies, because HUD is obviously one of the main ones. Health and Human Services, State Health Department, and there are new groups developing at state with environmental justice focus as well.
Okay. That's good. Yeah,
I don't know if everybody knows, but we did receive that HUD grant that we tried to get off the ground and did not have very good success with it. We only did 3 homes for basically giving back, I think, $1 million back to them. Yeah,
Just because no one would.
we had just a lot of difficulties trying to get the contractor to come down and do the work. There's only one that we can use. They're out of Fountain. The costs per unit just were way, with HUD, the way we had it scheduled, we had to do everything under like a $12,000 budget. And the first house we did was $65,000. The second house was 45, and then the third house was 100,000. So
wow.
the work is just too expensive to do.
Well, and that's for our folks from our federal representatives. It's one thing that we've heard pretty constantly is how a lot of communities don't even want to put in for HUD grants because they are incredibly complicated. The overhead is incredibly expensive. And a lot of the jurisdictions I've been hearing over the last 20 years say they end up spending much more just trying to hold it together than any benefit that they get out of it. So they just say no. And so I've always encouraged every time we have that conversation to feed that back to our representatives with the Congress to say, hey, is there something you can take a look at and see if you can find a way to streamline that?
So interestingly,
Yeah,
call first and then I'll.
yeah. And I see Kathy taking notes over there furiously, so thank you for noting it, Kathy.
I just had a question for Aaron. Is there any possibility of lead in the petroleum fluid? I don't think so. I think when they did sampling on that, it was all petroleum product, and it was about 9 foot down. So it's clear for that, but for that whether. I know they used to add lead to a lot of increase. This was, I think, it
Whether
was
diesel.
diesel. Yeah, this one was actually diesel.
And I guess on that topic of trying to follow up on that. Jamie and I both have been trying to follow up with our removal branch to follow up on some things that we had hoped would be done when Duke Nguyen, the on-scene coordinator, was trying to help us with that, and then it moved on to state oil folks. But one of the things that was sort of an outstanding possibility was indoor air monitoring to see if there were any vapor intrusion from the diesel oil. So that's still something that could happen, but we haven't been able to close the loop with internal people, so.
Well, I believe it was vapor that instigated the discovery of the.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it was the storm sewer, right?
Yeah, and it's all, it depends on different times of year too. It's all water table going up and down, so.
Did it happen Saturday, Sunday rain? Because I haven't been down there.
I know, I was down there earlier today, I didn't smell it, I didn't smell sewer, I guess. I'll pay better attention. It has gotten better inside since they did something with the sewer, like, I mean, they messed with right, they spent like last summer down there.
They did some
Doing
maintenance
this
on the
without-
food system that increased the drain.
I heard somebody talk to one of the workers, or there was some of them that like, when CDOT went through, did their thing, they just kind of closed off certain lines and stuff, but then they weren't draining anymore or going anywhere. So, but I don't know.
Sabrina,
If that's true, Eric, let me know. Oops. If it's true, let me know.
Well, it'd be hard to find out.
Okay.
Those guys, yeah, we have to find like someone that actually have knowledge of it. But yeah.
Because
it's part of a problem.
I'm on the state transportation commission now, so if an issue comes up, I can raise it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've been looking into this piecemeal for the last several months.
point to you, thank you, Doug.
Yeah, what's that?
I was gonna point to you, so that's what I had my name up for. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't have do I do this when I can't find the hand raise. So anyway, there's two sites. Obviously, there's the old railroad spill, which has been both through OPS and through our voluntary cleanup program. You know, and the short story on that is both programs decided there was residual contamination from the railroad yard spill, and it's easy. I won't say easier. The value of trying to get that residual contamination out of groundwater wasn't worth it based on the very limited, if any, risk to potential receptors. And then there's a site over on Santa Fe near the Sonic Drive-In that again has been both through OPS and it was closed out and through the CDPHE voluntary cleanup program. And again, same kind of story as with the railroad spill, but you know, I think EPA has been looking into maybe doing some vapor intrusion sampling and trying to see if there's any potential risks through that route. But that's what I've learned so far. I still need to dig up some old files and look through them and see if I missed something. But for what it's worth, that's what I've found so far.
I want to back up half a sec too on the HUD grant issue, because it's not just Pueblo that's having this issue, even other Front Range towns are having it. And I think Denver County similarly has returned funds back. So it is part of the larger conversation. And one of the things that I think is happening at HUD is a lot of rebuilding of staff with their new administration. And so they're having to relearn issues that maybe other folks had been working on for a long time, but they've since retired or moved on. And so that's part of this lead collaboration and trying to get state people, HUD people, EPA, different programs at EPA together to talk about all the various sources of lead in communities, because it's not just here, it's, you know, any community with larger home stock, older home stock. And so more to come on that, but it's a huge priority for our administration.
Thank you. And Janine,
Just an administrative note, we don't have anybody participating in the meeting today on the phone, so I just thought I'd point out to you at the bottom of your screen there on the right, there's a little smiley face with a plus sign that says reactions. If you click on that, then you get to either lower your hand or like I'm about to, or you can raise your hand. And that's how I'm monitoring, if someone out there in the ethos wants to say something, Doug.
In the ethos. We also are welcoming Velma, who is here. Velma, we did.
Would have been here 15 minutes ago if she'd have realized it was a hybrid meeting. Sorry.
No, we're so happy to have you in person.
Well, I know, that's why I texted to ask you if it was in person or I
Yeah,
meant in person versus hybrid. Because I had to leave this other meeting I was in and couldn't leave early today. Normally I can leave I have a 4 to 5:30 meeting that I can't reschedule.
Right.
But normally I don't have to leave it, so I can leave early. So, and I couldn't find the email saying with the link to
oh,
this, so I was behind. I'm annoyed with myself as much as anybody else
wow.
for not being able to
Well,
figure that out.
You've mostly just missed intros and celebrations for being here. You came for the substantive part, so thanks. I'm sorry for the mix up.
Oh, that's great.
Um,
Appreciate it.
okay.
It's been that kind of day.
We understand. Sabrina, Sarah, I think we're gonna hear other just big picture updates before we go to OU1.
Yeah, I think Sarah Ray was gonna give us a little enforcement update. I can also keep expounding a little bit on where we are with OU1. I mean, Sarah, I think that,
I think before
Beth is
yeah.
gonna give some update on OU1 numbers and things. And from the general side for operable unit 2, we're continuing to move forward with contracting stuff.
Okay.
People want to hear about that?
I think we do, but in just 1 minute, because we'll try to be like organized about OU1 and everything we need to know about OU1 and then with OU2 and everything. If that works.
That works.
Okay, so Sarah Ray, can you give us a quick update just on the big picture liability enforcement status of things?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Ray. I am the EPA site attorney for the Colorado Smelter site. I think my supervisor, Andrea Madigan, spoke to you maybe a couple months ago or late last year. I guess I'll stop here. Is my volume okay? Can you all hear me?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, great. I think in just the effort to maintain transparency, we wanted to provide another update on kind of our ongoing investigation. That's my main role at the site. All of the sites that I cover is kind of doing this standard liability investigation, looking for potentially responsible parties. EPA just generally has an enforcement first policy under CERCLA. So that is my role, and I am doing that at the Colorado Smelter site along with my team. And I'll speak to as much as I can. I think I'll just remind everyone too, it gets a little tricky with enforcement topics with confidentiality issues, but I will share as much as I can in an effort to be as transparent as possible. The first thing I want to talk about is EPA's enforcement discretion policy. I believe we've talked about this before, maybe Andrea mentioned it, but this relates to residential property owners at Superfund sites. And this policy that EPA has just generally states that we typically do not cost recover for cleanup and sampling work that we do at sites against residential property owners. The policy is a little bit more complicated, but it just says if the property owner hasn't caused the contamination, made the contamination worse, we're generally not going to go after you to cost recover. And EPA has all the intention to exercise this enforcement discretion at this site, the Colorado Smelter site. I just want to point out one caveat and make it really clear that this enforcement discretion policy applies to residential property owners. It does not apply, however, to commercial or industrial properties. And that's nationwide. It's just the policy is limited to residential properties. Ryan, do you want me to go through my entire spiel or kind of like pause? I have 3 little topics I was going to cover, pause at each topic and ask for questions, or just kind of at the end?
I think at the end is fine. Your spiel isn't very long, right? Was that a couple minutes or is it like 5 or 10?
Nope, a few more minutes, 2 more topics, maybe 2 minutes each.
Okay, I think I don't see any like cards or hands up, so I think you can keep going.
Okay, great. The second thing I wanted to talk about, just kind of generally high level, when we identify potentially responsible parties that have liability, just the variety of tools that EPA has at our availability to resolve liability. And it really is a case by case analysis as to which tool we decide to utilize and what's the best fit. We really do have flexibility. It's not just this one size fits all approach. It really is customized to the site and the case specific facts that we see at each of the individual sites. Some of the tools that we do have available are cash out settlements, where a party can pay a cash amount that would go towards work at the site or reimbursement of work that's already been done. We also have agreements that we can reach with liable parties where they'll agree to do the work themselves. That could be sampling, that could be cleanup work. There is a lot of flexibility there too. We've seen lots of types of those agreements before. Another tool that's available are Superfund liens. When we are looking to cost recover, we do have the option to perfect Superfund liens on properties. There's a whole process that we go through before perfecting Superfund liens. And it really, again, it is a case by case analysis. We don't just go immediately to perfecting Superfund liens. It really is only where it makes sense. And we really do a kind of thorough analysis as to what all of our tools are available. And sometimes the best tool is the Superfund lien. Lastly, I'll talk about ability to pay settlements. I think Andrea mentioned this, and I really want to re-emphasize that we're not looking to bankrupt anyone. We do have flexibility to take into account when a party has inability to pay. So that we have a whole process that we work through with financial experts and have supporting documentation to just show what a party does have the ability to pay and really tailor our settlements to that. The last thing I want to talk about too is, sorry, did someone have a question?
Go ahead. I wasn't sure if you were done, but yes, please, go ahead.
I'll just quickly note too, just outside of the enforcement investigation, another role that I play along with our team is just being a resource to prospective purchasers. I'm sure you've heard from the whole EPA team that we really support redevelopment and reuse of the Superfund site, specifically the Colorado Smelter site. So we do provide some of these resources in an effort to support the redevelopment and reuse. And that is when we have prospective purchasers interested in any of these parcels that are within the boundary of the Superfund site or the study area, we are willing to hop on the call and participate in a prospective purchaser inquiry call and kind of answer any questions about the site, any questions about liability, how they can shield themselves from liability. And we also have an option to also draft letters that kind of lay out those same things as well. So I really just wanted to highlight that role that we provide as well as a resource to prospective purchasers and support redevelopment and reuse. And that's all I had.
Thank you so much. So it sounds like there's nothing like particularly new. There's no major things to report. We just sort of wanted to keep everyone posted on what's happening. Is that accurate? There's nothing else anyone should know about the status of things.
That's right.
Terry.
Thank you. Well, this is, thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that briefing. This is something that we've talked a little bit about in the past, and it has a lot of it has a lot of sharp edges to it. It stifles amazing, to a large degree, the ability to have people talk to us openly, which is, what we've been trying to encourage. So you run it, the efforts that we've been doing on the residential side, it gets into the commercial side and it starts to affect the ability to work with people, frankly, because they're nervous about liability. And even though there are promises that folks won't be bankrupted, we're the government, we're here to help you frighten folks. So anyway, it's just something that I'm hoping that we can talk about more and more to the degree that we can under the confidentiality provisions. I for one would love to know, even if it isn't, I don't necessarily want to know which properties have what, but I would love to know in your investigations, are you discovering issues that you are going to need to deal with? Because that will then help us as a citizens advisory group kind of discuss path forward. And the other thing that you had brought up towards the tail end, you know, the ability, the good faith purchaser option, or might even be something else. I think that we had talked about a year or two ago about the potential for the city to come in with something which would be a reuse function, such as an urban renewal function, if the city worked in advance with EPA and CDPHE to say, let's identify what's there, what can be done in order to protect the health of the citizens. But what can we do to come in and basically, for economic development purposes, find a way to transfer ownership over to the city and put it as part of a redevelopment project and avoid some of the more difficult liability issues. I just want to throw those out. I don't really think this is the place we need to discuss that, but those are some of the things that we have talked about in the past. And I'm an attorney, but I'm not an environmental attorney, so I am completely out of my game on this kind of issue, but I do know enough about it that I know it's a concern. And these are some of the issues that we've raised in the past. And Sarah, one of the reasons why we want to do that, we're trying to find a way to expedite OU2. And one of the reasons why we want to do that is because we're moving rapidly towards closing out OU1. And in order to do, on a local government perspective, a comprehensive reuse function, you got to consider both parts. And so if one's moving and the other one isn't, all it does is screws it up. And then 30 years from now, we're where we've always been economically. That's one of the reasons why I know that I've been arguing this. I know that my friends at the city have been arguing it, and I have had specific conversations about this with some of the city staff and the mayor to say there may be a path forward if we engage in those conversations. So anyway, just want to throw that out. And I don't know if you have any comment to any of that.
I'll just commit to participating in these meetings, like as we have updates to share. As we work through the process, things will no longer be confidential once they're kind of signed off on. And I'd be happy to come back to the CAG and report out on those just at this time. Yeah, with confidentiality, we're kind of working through the normal process and can't share too much of the details, but I think a lot of the things would be good news to the CAG. So I'm happy to provide ongoing updates as we work through this process.
It sounds like the two things I heard from Terry, to keep in mind, Sarah, which it sounds like you will, and are one, just the CAG's very sort of thematic themes of, you know, if there are things that are happening out there that you can talk about, if and when you can talk about them in terms of your work, if there's themes that you can share, broad brush, and also just for you to keep in mind this idea of the CAG, if there's a function the CAG can play in helping with the big picture of how reuse happens and how the property ownership piece fits in, and whether there's creative problem solving that needs to happen to, you know, meet some of the liability issues. So it sounds like it's like those two pieces in particular.
Yeah, and you know, if we need to engage in a dialogue early with us or with the city or both, I'd just like to identify that and see if we can get it moving.
Thank you, Sarah. That's really helpful, and it's so nice to have you kind of checking in and reporting periodically and hearing from folks.
Great, thank you, everyone.
Sure. And then, oh, Velma, yes.
Excuse me, just, I just wanted to follow up on Terry's comment, and that is that I think it's important also, and just to I think you said this, and I just sort of want to emphasize it, with how can we talk with you and also talk frankly and publicly about some of these issues, and yet still manage the concerns that Terry brings up about not scaring away development and folks in city government who need to be able to be involved, not shutting them down.
And Velma, I guess one question I have for you and you all is, in the spirit of not scaring people with liability discussions, is if you all as community members, I think, hear updates from EPA and have thoughts about, that's language that is really resonates well with people, or here's language that really freaks people out. Even language, I think, around liability and right enforcement is scary. And so if there's, I think, balancing being candid and upfront with people and not using language that's unnecessarily frightening, I think that's a good function for you all have an ear for those things. So anyway, I see Velma and Paul. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna say, I think, liability concerns in one phrase, one way or another, have and Terry, you've been, and others have been involved with this as long as I have been a part of this discussion since the earliest days. It was part of why people didn't want a Superfund site in the first place. And those concerns have continued. So I think sometimes I get a sense of a hesitancy to speak frankly about the issues and to use the word liability when it's what people are already thinking. And so I think in some conversations, at least, it's perfectly okay to say, this isn't an issue that we're familiar with. And we're prepared to discuss it with you and answer your questions and deal with it. It's something we're familiar with and we can deal with, because liability concerns, whether they call them that or something else in property values or whatever, are already on people's mind whenever this subject comes up.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So not to beat around the Paul.
As we're discussing on liability, I'm kind of curious about John Starr property, because he told me that the EPA put a lien on his property and he's about ready to go bankrupt. But I'm curious about what his situation is and how that's going to play out, because I think other property owners out there would be interested.
Sarah, did you hear that comment from Paul?
I'm trying to lean in. What I heard was questions about what I can share about the liens that were perfected on the John Starr's parcels. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Sure. So yes, part of the public record, we have started working through the process of looking at operable unit 2, and those are mostly industrial and commercial properties. I'll just reiterate that enforcement discretion policy does not apply to those properties. So we're moving through the more traditional kind of tools that I explained in my presentation. And we have moved forward with perfecting, I think, on 6 parcels, Superfund liens. And I think 4 of the parcels are owned by John Starr, kind of right on where the slag pile is. He has kind of 1 big parcel and then 3 smaller parcels. So we have perfected the liens. But what I can't talk about is like how we are going to resolve that liability. But I can say, as we're working through that process with Mr. Starr, we're in constant communication with him and kind of trying to assess which of the tools that I described would be the best fit for him to resolve liability, so we can come to an agreement and liability would be resolved and he can move forward with what he wants to do with the parcels.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Question?
Yes.
So is that because they're industrial properties now, and industrial properties are handled differently than residential? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. So typically, I mean, liability, I think Andrea went through this, so I didn't cover it. Just if you're a property owner within a Superfund site, the way Congress just set up the liability scheme is that a current owner has liability. A caveat to that is typically for residential property owners, we have this enforcement discretion policy that while residential property owners do have liability technically under the law, we have our enforcement discretion to not seek cost recovery from residential property owners. We don't have a policy that extends to industrial or commercial properties that would allow us to exercise that enforcement discretion for industrial and commercial properties. So that's where the distinction lies. As I said, EPA intends to exercise its enforcement discretion for the residential properties at this site. However, we don't have that policy tool for these industrial or commercial properties. So we're looking at the more traditional tools that we do have available to resolve liability for those commercial industrial properties within the site boundary.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And Velma's nodding. I think that answered the question. Yeah, Velma, good.
Yeah, I thought that under Superfund, the property owners had liability and the discretionary piece answers why I was wondering why the residential.
It's a tough
Property.
issue.
Yeah.
It's the reason why I would love to discuss it more in depth and
Yeah.
whatever appropriate capacity is.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you know, I think it's a fine line, I think, but you know, since we have to, as CAG members and as community members, we talk amongst the community members about these issues, including our business community as well as our citizens and residents. If there was going to be a big action against property owners, it would be nice to at least have a heads up, you know, to sort of say, you know, now as we move into OU2, there are going to be some of these liens, don't freak out. We're going to work with property owners, you know, easy enough to say, don't freak out unless it's your property.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If we knew this was going down, I certainly didn't, but I could have missed the memo, so.
I think, I mean, I remember the update from Andrea, but I think this is the point. I think Velma, your point is why Sarah's here. And so I think periodic updates and scheduling a real conversation, Sarah, when you think that there's more that can be discussed, sounds like people are interested. So I want to move us along. I know you wanted to give Sabrina a really quick EPA staff update, which I think
We kind of did.
almost everyone has already heard probably, but then I do want to get us into OU1 since we now need to know.
Right, and we can touch on OU2 a little bit, around this just recent conversation as it relates to the use plan.
Yeah, so we'll come back to it a little bit then too.
Okay. So on the personnel, we've got Jamie. Can you show your little face here again, Jamie? Hey, Jamie. So I think a lot of people have already heard Jamie's going to be moving into section supervisor position here any day now.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. She is no longer my minion. My boss.
The student becomes the master.
Which is awesome. Very, very good. And then we've added Sydney to the team as well. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, congratulations to all of you, and that's great.
Yeah. So that's it for our personnel.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like we should transition to OU1. One thing I did want to say is as we're going through tonight's meeting, I'll just select topics that people want to put on CAG agendas in the future, and then we'll kind of flesh them out with the steering committee. And I'll revisit that with you at the end of the meeting. So feel free to just keep track of those things. OU1, OU1 is me.
So as usual, I have some percentages to give updates. I'm really excited about the soil sampling percentage. We have reached 99% for soil sampling. Yeah. That is huge news. I know at a lot of Superfund sites we get to 99. It's really hard to find, so we're probably going to stick at 99, but that doesn't mean we're not going to keep moving forward on soil sampling. So I'm really excited about that. That shows huge progress. For the dust sampling, we are 68% done. It makes sense that's been lagging with COVID, but it is CWT, our sampling contractor, has been cruising with dust sampling, so we're really doing great on that. Let me check for soil cleanups. We're at 86%, so hopefully we're going to 90 here soon, getting really close on those. And then with dust cleanup, we are at 59% complete. So that dust again, that's lagging the most, but it's still moving forward pretty quickly. And then with those great percentages, we are expecting that our timeline for sampling and cleanup that will be done with residential sampling next spring, that kind of the timeline we keep giving people, really trying to encourage folks to sign up. We just did an interview today with KOAA News to get the word out, let people know to sign up. So we are doing the same last call that we've been talking about for many, like almost a year now. We're still doing those things using Nextdoor. I did want to mention on the Nextdoor platform, we now have a way to contact only people within the Colorado Smelter study area. I think about 560 people are signed up on the Nextdoor platform to use that, so we can send messages directly to those folks. And so, very exciting. I thought you were doing a mosquito or something. There is a flyer. So.
Can we have access to that somehow, or?
Let me, yeah, let me see if I can transfer that
That's
to, communication, because it's huge, and I know they did it for all of our Superfund.
You said 500?
560, I think, yeah,
That's
in
awesome.
the Superfund area, yeah,
Okay.
'cause, like, lots of people use Nextdoor. My mom uses Nextdoor, and she was like, who's your coworker that was posting from EPA, so I know people use it.
Yeah, we could do a lot of outreach on it.
Yeah, so we're excited about that. I've been doing some Nextdoor posts. I might try to do like a series of posts of like, here's this one, like here's part 2, 3, 4, so people are like paying attention. We're hoping to maybe do a letter. We're considering this with the mayor and maybe city council member Vicente for District 4 to see if they could write a letter encouraging some of those resident folks to participate in sampling and cleanup. So we're looking at our various options, obviously social media for our main ones. We'll probably go door to door in October, and so try to contact people then and really hit the dust sampling folks, because that's our biggest percentage, and then some of the soil cleanup people. So I think those are kind of the folks we're gonna hit in October. Let me check my notes. And then with last call, I did want to check. I know I feel like every time I talk about it in here, I feel like I'm harassing you guys about it, but I know it's kind of hard to have informal conversations in this big CAG meeting, but I wanted to check if any of the community members, any of y'all are interested in being on a subcommittee and like chatting with me about it, because I have my list of things that I thought were good ideas, but y'all live here, you've seen and heard what I think are good ideas, you talk to people, so I know you, Terry, I'm singling you out. I know you talked about it before, so if you want to go on that subcommittee and chat with me like every once in a while, that'd be great. If Paul, Eric, any of y'all are interested, please let me know, and we can set that. We can meet as formally or informally as we'd like. But I think that sounds, as we keep moving through last fall, and I'd love to get some more feedback if you have.
Yeah, thank you. I'm all in favor of it, and you can help me on any of the crazy stuff I bring up. But yeah, because this is something we've talked about from day one of that worry about when you get to the 90s, 95%, but you're really having a tough time getting to 100. And we've been talking a lot about it as much publicity as we could from day one, that there's a very big wallet from the federal government in town, and it's taking care of this. And once that wallet leaves, it ain't coming back, and it ends up being on your back unless we can figure out something else. And so this last call element fits so nicely into the next topic, which is the institutional controls issue. And we've been, anticipating that conversation. So a subcommittee to kind of go over everything that you tried to do, what's left, what else can we do, who can we engage? All those things would be really helpful. And whoever has a fly swatter, use it. Yeah.
Sabrina, go ahead. And I'm interested in.
Yeah, the only thing I really wanted to add to that is reiterating, getting locals' ideas, because right now we're at those, like the toughest nuts that are multiple time contacts from our contractors. And they're at this point, they're what we call hard nosed. They are out and out refusing. We try to find out what their issue is to see if we can explain things better. And sometimes we get no answer, or, just the phone's hung up or the door is closed, whatever. So it's just, we're at that really tough percentage, especially on the soil side.
Velma, go ahead, and I'm interested in if there are other CAG members who want to be on a committee, and I assume it would be things like if the letter and the councilman send send a letter, mayor and the councilman send a letter, what should that say? What ideas do you all have that are sort of insider? Yeah. Anyway, Velma, go ahead.
Just responding to Sabrina. Issue. And presumably the subcommittee, would you have access to the list of the contracts and what the responses have been, who slammed the door in your face and things like that? Well, we have that. Yeah, because I mean, if we're getting to the point where it's the small number of contacts. Yeah.
I think Beth is having a concern about
Yeah,
that.
as far as being able to not necessarily broadcast to the world, but you know.
So Beth, go ahead. I'm mindful of one of us talking only at a time, just for the online people. But yeah, Beth.
Yeah, Velma, I would love to be able to do that, but I don't think I can. We have, in the government, we have this, personally identifiable information, and someone's address is considered that, and so it is one of those great government things where we're allowed to have the list, but we can't like give it to y'all, so you can go like plot it on yourself. Like, I did ask, I know a while ago, you guys raised the idea of like coming around with us when we do door to door, and, or maybe, let me double check with management, because I remember when I was like, oh, can they go do it by themselves? Management was like, we don't feel comfortable with that, like representing EPA, but if you came with us, that might be, if like Paul and I went to someone's door, they might be like, oh, Paul, I don't hate you as much as I hate that.
They'll just close the door on me. So.
Eric, yeah, go ahead.
Can you just give us a really large picture of this, or get your file, a very well updated version of this, because this has already been approved.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, we clear ourselves, and then we set up a Grove Neighborhood Association and so forth, so we'll take that moniker to go say, hey, we're doing it for Grove. We do the same thing up here through, you know, the Bojon Hill Association and so forth, so.
So you're wondering if you could just like take a map.
Well, I mean, this is listed every property in the site, and this has been approved, so we just gotta make sure this is very updated and.
And I think the sensitivity is more around names and phone numbers, less the addresses, because you can go
We
find
can
the
figure
address
that
and go
out.
to the assessor's page and get all the information you want,
Exactly.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
No, I think that this, I'm just saying that this might be one of the things in your subcommittee that you talk about, like what after Beth gets some info from her management. Because this is probably the kind of thing that, anyway, you all are gonna think about in the cracking the final nuts. Velma and then Beth, and then we should move on.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I thought I had Paul volunteer.
I thought I did.
Subcommittee, did I? And then I interrupted.
Yeah, I just volunteered to join Barry and help that.
Y'all knock on some doors, I'm not scared.
Okay. All right, so Eric will be conscripted to knock on doors if needed, and Paul and Terry are gonna be sort of part of your subcommittee, right? Okay, so Paul, Terry, Beth, and Beth was on call. And then maybe you all, Paul and Terry, Beth, could just report back at the next, you know, whether it's steering committee or just let us know.
I think that sounds great, and we can do it in this OU1 section as I usually talk about last call, and I just want to raise my flag, because I will check, and I know Sarah Ray is kind of our privacy person, and I was talking with Sydney, because she has experience from Atlanta, and they have like a tool where you could go and like search every address and see if it was in the site, so I just need to double check. I am hesitant to say yes, anything that I don't know for sure that we could do, but I do think collaborating and having locals engaged in this is most likely going to be more effective than just having me pushing out information, which is what we've been doing, and it has some success, but maybe not as much as we know. So thank you all for that.
Perfect, thank you, that's great. Let's see, so I think we're on IC. Is there anything else that you want to say? Is there any other questions about OU1 and the numbers piece? Is that, okay. I think Doug, you were gonna give an update, and then Terry, I don't know if you wanted to chime in, but, okay, go ahead, Doug.
Sure, thanks, Ryan. We are at a bit of an impasse with the city in discussions about the institution control, and specifically the ordinance. So we have a meeting with the mayor's office tomorrow to discuss some of the outstanding issues. And I think everybody's aware what the primary issues are. I will review them really quickly just to give people an idea. The primary issue is, of course, the funding piece of it. We think we have a workaround that will shift some of the administrative burden to CDPHE that we are going to propose to the mayor's office tomorrow. Some of the issues have related to the number of properties that would be impacted by the ordinance. I know that's been a concern of the CAG in the past, and to reiterate, properties that would be subject to the ordinance include those properties that refused access for sampling and or cleanup. And in some circumstances, those properties where sampling was done, cleanup was done, but some level of contamination was left below a certain depth. So again, we are meeting with the mayor's office and the city attorney tomorrow to kind of continue hashing these issues out. Hopefully we'll make some progress tomorrow, but we should have more to report very soon.
Okay.
Terry, anything you want to add to that?
Thanks, Doug. Just a couple of things, just to refresh everybody, the perspective that we've always tried to do on institutional controls is to say, all right, you got this large map and it's a little bit of a mosaic of which properties are on this map and which properties are not. And the ones that are on it are the ones that in theory are subject to the ordinance. The ones that are not on that map are not subject to it. With the idea that what all can we do to keep shrinking the number of properties that are on that map? So shrinking the need for any kind of institutional controls. That's the general theory. And then the other theory was, like Doug had indicated, the question of how much of a burden are we putting on local government? It isn't all on local, it isn't all on the city. That's what I was talking to a couple of folks from the Attorney General's office last week. I think they all go together, but talking about the fact in Pueblo, there's a joint city-county building department. And that's who handles building permits. And a lot of this is driven by the building department. So you don't just engage the city in the conversation, it drags in the joint building department, and it also, to a degree, drags the county into it. So a little more complicated. It's things that we can navigate. That administrative question and cost was one of the issues, but the other costs that we really would like to explore, and it's the one that I know is a little tougher, because it's creating precedents and everything. Is there a way for us to find out money that we might be able to put aside so when the enforcement process happens and somebody comes in and says, look, I gotta tear out my sidewalk, and because of some of the utility work, it's going to be lower than the limit, and so there's going to be sampling costs and there's going to be potentially cleanup costs. Is there a way to set aside some kind of funding or funding source that would allow folks in those circumstances to tap into that? And a lot of times these would be folks who were not necessarily owners at the time everybody's out knocking on the door. They end up being something like some of our CAG members who say, look, I bought my house. I had no idea that these problems were in this neighborhood until I started hearing about the CAG and everything. So that is our fear. That's a little, I know that's a much tougher nut to crack, that financing side there. But that's conversations that we have had. And that's the other side. One of the members of the Attorney General's office that I've known for a long time, actually, that I've worked on with our chemical weapons program for, well, let's just say, I think Janine and I were both in grade school when we started on that project. So we worked on it quite a while. He called along with one of the other assistant AGs is working on this particular topic. And so we had a nice long conversation about the history, difficulties, the issues, and that sort of thing. And they were asking me, can you give us some ideas of what might be able to navigate the impasse? And Doug, these are some of the ideas that I specifically discussed with them. I don't know if they will go anywhere, but I talked about some of the personalities that are involved in negotiation. on the local side and what some of the issues are that are going to be important to them, and how potentially to navigate that with some of these issue conversations. Whole idea is try to make sure institutional controls are as limited as they can possibly be, and eliminate the difficulty and cost of dealing with them to the greatest degree that we can. It's like a one-time opportunity. If we don't do it now, it'll probably never be done. So that's the reason why we're pushing it.
And I saw Eric's start go up in the moment.
Yeah, I guess this question is for Doug. Right now, I've had, I guess I'll just use me as the example. I've had soil cleanup done on the outside of the property, and actually 2 different properties that have homes on them. I did not do I have not had the indoor dust work sampled as of yet. When it comes to institutional controls, as of for now, the dust home sampled by year, it looks like we're up to 1,256, so we're almost 700 at least short of doing sampling on the indoor dust. Is that going to be, I mean, originally the indoor dust was put to us as a CAG and as a community, was that it was kind of our opportunity that whether we wanted to have indoor done, yes or no. And from that point, I guess, was the decision of the homeowner. So how are the institutional controls? Because you're kind of saying that somebody that didn't have any, if a property owner didn't have it tested, then they're going to fall under the institutional control. Does that go for the indoor dust also, I guess is the question?
No, the indoor dust issue, and tell me if this doesn't answer your question, Eric. The indoor dust issue is not part of the institutional control. So
don't even get it tested, because if you get it tested, then you have a chance of getting institutional control.
Get it tested if you have a child in there.
yeah, if you get the indoor dust tested and you exceed the cleanup thresholds, EPA will clean up your indoor dust.
Okay.
If you do not, the institutional control does not plan to address indoor dust. It's intended to address exterior soils only, and it uses it. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead. I was just gonna say, a bunch of light bulbs went off in this room, like, that seems like major news to, and positive news.
And some of the steps we've taken to address some of the concerns about limiting to the extent possible the reach of the IC is there's a 5 cubic yard threshold limit. So if you're excavating less than that, you're not subject to the ordinance. We've used an existing city process to minimize the administration costs, and so we've taken some steps. We're continuing to have those conversations. I'm happy to continue discussing these issues with the steering committee and the IC work group, which is basically the steering committee. We can talk a little bit about funding. It's just there's not traditionally funding sources available. However, because we don't expect that many of these properties in a given year would be subject to an ordinance, I'd at least be willing to have conversations about certain circumstances where maybe the state could provide sampling. Again, those are, conversations for the future, but I think the first hurdle is to get over the impasse with the city. And Herrick, I hope I answered your question that indoor dust is not part of the IC. So even if you tested and decided not to get cleanup, it wouldn't impact indoor cleanups. It would only impact outdoor soils.
Okay.
Okay.
It does seem like the system's broken, but I doubt I'll be having my property tested.
I want to add something on that.
Okay, Sabrina, can you add in, and Velma has.
So the piece I want to add on that is the issue with not doing the indoor dust is related to selling the home, refinancing the home. And it's more on the lending side where we're still coming up with those barriers of a lender that they can't say that the home was tested and tested clean or dirty and then EPA was able to clean it, that they won't lend on the property. The other thing is that people get confused about our dust cleanup versus a lead abatement and lead disclosure requirements. And so if whether or not you have had your property tested, if it's built before 1978, you still have to disclose that there's likely lead in the home and give someone a pamphlet, it's EPA pamphlet that says how to protect your family from lead. So you still have to do that. It doesn't mean you have to abate, you have to disclose. So even if you've not done any cleanup or any sampling, disclosure required. If you've got data, disclosure required. If you've done cleanup and cleanup is done, you hand someone a letter that says cleanup done. Lender is happy with that. So it's a good reason to get the sample.
So, but
done.
what if your home was deemed to be, it needed cleanup then? I mean, to me, that should have an institutional control on it, just like. What I would prefer, the system's broken. Because it's kind of a catch-22. I mean, you're
almost, Eric, are you asking why it is that there isn't an institutional control?
well, I mean, to me, if
You're
you're gonna
glad
put one outside, I'm glad there isn't,
Right.
but. I mean, if you're gonna put one on the outside of the house, why wouldn't you put one on the inside of the house? What's different?
Is there a rationale?
Especially if there's people holding you accountable.
So part of it is because our cleanup is related to Colorado Smelter. So releases from the smelter to the environment. We had to make a link from the environment into the home. That was track-in, and we did the calculation to say, we think that about 30% of dust, especially from a bare soil yard, could get tracked into a home. There are way too many other sources of lead in home for us to address, and we don't have the Superfund authority to address them. And then on top of that, Doug can talk about it, the state environmental covenant doesn't have a way to deal with the interiors of structures.
There's
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
There is no existing local mechanism to address indoor dust. You know, like there is for a building permit for, you know, if you're tearing up the outside of your property. That's part of the consideration. The other consideration is that it becomes exponentially more difficult to tell people what to do inside their houses. And for the reduction in risk, if the yard is cleaned up or if the yard isn't dirty, it's a lot of effort for minimal gain.
And it leaves us with education and outreach.
Right.
As sort of our best next tool for, you have other sources of lead you need to be aware of and manage. So keep your paint in good shape, damp dust, HEPA vacuum. Be aware of other products that you might buy that could still have lead in them, children's toys, jewelry, cooking utensils and pottery. And it becomes knowledge and awareness.
That's helpful. Aaron, and then Sri, you had your thing that went down, and then Velma has her part of it. Go ahead.
One thing that I just thought of, Terry brought up, it'd be nice to have some kind of funding or pot of money available to help out some of these areas that, you know, somebody buys the property and they're, replacing or putting in the new garage or driveway or something. So with the new Environmental Justice Board, that might be an avenue to look at. That's going to be funding opportunity, and it's going to grow every year. This year is not going to be a big year for it, but every year after it'll grow by a percentage until it's a full amount of all the air fines that are coming into the board. And so you would have to have a situation set up, either the city or the city would probably have to apply for that and have it as a special type of a grant process. I think that might, we're barely in the very beginning processes of putting the RFP together and what that's going to look like and what we're going to fund. But that I think just hit me as a possibility to do something like that, because it's all around environmental justice. And this is an environmental justice issue that we're dealing with in this neighborhood. I think that might be something to look at.
That's huge. Actually, you just took one of my to-dos off. I was supposed to call you about that very issue.
Don't you love it? That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, I think these are the conversations that probably need to continue happening. And so Doug, it sounds like you're glad to based on what you all, the CAG and steering committee want, to keep sort of having this as a regular agenda item at steering committee meetings, see if there needs to be subcommittee meetings in between, but it sounds like you just all need to we need to keep this on the agenda.
Yeah, it's been an interesting process. I know that we on the CAG we have wanted to be involved in the conversation. We have not been, and that's not the fault. I just want everybody to know it's not the fault of CDPH or your EPA. So we're working the angles, trying to get a little bit. So.
Yeah, well, it's good. We'll keep it on the CAG agenda Wednesday. Velma, and then let's move us on. But, yeah, go ahead, Velma.
Yeah, yeah, I would just, reinforce the idea of, having institutional controls as a CAG agenda item as well. And I think you just said that originally we were saying steering committee, but I really don't want the steering committee to become a surrogate for the steering committee meetings to become a surrogate for the CAG or CAG involvement in these issues. Then what about the one, and I don't know that we need to discuss these in detail, but for Terry and Doug, two other questions that I have about institutional controls. One is, what about the financial aspects or obligations of city and county projects and contractors? Say that street to the yard line that needs to be done down below the level of the yard cleanup. I think that's one of the bags that municipalities often are left open in terms of financial obligations under institutional controls. And secondly, whether EPA or CDPHE, maybe CDC or HUD have programs, other programs to help both residential and possibly commercial property owners mitigate yard and indoor contamination. There may be linkages that need to be made as the institutional controls are being developed to plug in other kinds of resources that might be
And
useful.
Velma, is it possible to get, and maybe you intended these questions as more rhetorical, and we come back to them as sort of.
Right, they're come back to.
Okay.
Yeah, they're just items to highlight.
Perfect. I will put them in the notes and we will do that. I also have been keeping track on that topic tracking sheet of a number of questions specifically related to institutional control, so I'll add that to the list. But if it works, I want to move us along to OU2 because I want to make sure we're going to have enough time, even though we cut out the bulk of OU2 because that was going to be the groundwater presentation. Are we good? Any other OU1 issues or topics before we move? Okay. So Sabrina, I think you were going to basically just give a
big picture. Yeah. A lot of what Christina Baum and I have been working on for the last couple months, actually since February, and then things changed in May, and now we're doing things slightly differently, but making sure that we could get the bipartisan infrastructure law related funds that were moved up 2 years and get those on the ground so that Pacific Western Technologies, PWT, our sampling contractor, can start working on some more of the operable unit 2 sampling. And so that work, we're hoping September, we've got money available, but we've got to go through the contracting stuff. And hopefully by September, we've got that ready to get on the ground and do some more work. And we can talk with you all about what is in that statement of work and what we plan to do in regard to this year, next year, years out there. I guess the big idea is that we hope to start with some more soil sampling, surface water sediment, some more core water sampling to look at the Reunión fields, Reunión lakes, natural areas some more, and some fish tissue, some different biota, so bugs and vegetation and different sorts of sampling and analysis for some of those areas as well. But we could talk in more detail if people want to have like an overview of what's in the statement of work and what we're going to do this year and what we think. We're on a kind of a weird cycle based on when we first got the money. So it's the middle of every year, June to the end of May is how our work assignments to them are gonna roll out. And so we could talk about what we have planned for September through the end of May, and then what we think we could try to get done from June 23 into May of 24, etc. But that did move up what we thought a possible record of decision might be, that was kind of way out there. We're hopeful 2026, 2027 timeframe, but it's really too soon to know with a site like OU2 that hasn't really been fully characterized yet. So that's kind of the big stuff. I think another really important thing is on the OU2 revitalization, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I guess we can, since we don't have Sarah, and I don't know, Sarah Graves, were you gonna touch a little bit on anything today on surface water, groundwater, or we're pushing that off, right?
Yeah, I think so. I talked with Sarah a little bit about, but she was prepping the presentation as a whole. And so I think what we landed on is just if anybody had specific questions about that presentation. I know it was like a few months ago at this point, but kind of make sure that as we're prepping it, or as Sarah and I are working on it, we cover what we need to. So I think it was just going to be kind of open discussion about if there were specific groundwater questions related to OU2.
And I wonder if maybe we can pause for a second before we get this sort of revitalization brief highlight, because I feel like that's important. People are going to be wanting to talk about that. And we just touch on the technical site work for a second. So I'm wondering, I mean, I can imagine personally, and I see Eric's hand is up, that people might be interested in talking about what's in the scope of work and what sampling is going to be happening in the context of like the groundwater, the big picture of sort of what Sarah and Sarah were going to talk about. And I just wonder if that makes sense, or what
3
you all.
months are gonna go by if we don't talk about it now. We don't talk about it 3 months, so.
Yep, or we could go back to monthly meetings.
I prefer that, yeah, I mean, especially when somebody can't be here. So now we got another 3 months that we're waiting to get answers and understand the process.
Yep.
And by then, the process has already been deemed and in the process, so.
So yeah, so the next CAG meeting is October. So what is that? What are we in? So that's 2 months, but the site work is going to happen probably, it sounds like, for the beginning of the OU2 work, sounds like in September. So I wonder, I mean, one thing we could do is we could pause and not talk about revitalization tonight, and just use the rest of this meeting, which would be fine if everyone's in support of that, to talk about OU2 and kind of get a little bit more on what's in the scope of work. Here a bit about the groundwater work. Do you all want to do that?
No. I mean,
Yeah,
well,
go ahead. And Eric, did you, I mean,
I'm sorry, I'm
No,
totally.
go ahead.
I'm just gonna say, we're already having to not talk about stuff that's important that we wanted to talk about in order to talk about stuff that we could talk about next month. I'm telling you, I know everybody's struggling, and I'm trying to be funny about it, but I'm serious as a crap.
No, I agree. Since this is a recorded meeting, we've been very vocal as a steering committee that we need monthly meetings. We don't need quarterly meetings. We don't want bi-monthly meetings. We want monthly meetings. We're at the most important stage of this entire process right now. And so to go down to 4 meetings a year, it just makes absolutely zero sense.
so let's do this, because the 4 meetings a year are really starting in 2023. I mean, 2022 has been a hybrid year for a lot of reasons. So we have this, we've been having every other month meeting, what we've had in the 2000s.
Well, we haven't even managed that.
Close.
Well, anyway, I mean, I think. we
Well,
have
not
actually,
well in
but-
that. I mean, the original plan was to have every other month.
Yeah.
And the first other month meeting was canceled,
Mhm.
and the second month meeting was a non-meeting. It probably shouldn't even
Yeah,
have been considered legitimate because we talked business, but it wasn't recorded or minutes
Yeah.
taken.
yeah, September was not considered a meeting, and I think everyone, I mean, I think we have talked about what has not worked, what has not worked for you all community members, and what you would like. So I think you all have made yourselves really clear, and I think it's great to keep bringing things up that are important to you, but I think we do need to figure out, given that, what we should do. So we are meeting, in October is the next CAG meeting. And yeah, Paul, I see your hand is up, but Eric, you're still up.
Well, it's different subject.
You're
Water monitoring is like
You're wanting
my,
substance.
yeah.
So we're gonna come back to the substantive question or comment for you. And I think right now we're just trying to figure out, do you all want to spend the next, half an hour really just talking about the OU2 status and monitoring? Or do you wanna,
Well, it seems like the crux of our conversation right now is the limiting of our input. And somehow the agency of the citizens is being reduced considerably. And I'd like to know who actually made the decision to do quarterly. Was it one of our team members?
No, it was us, just
Yeah.
based
Well,
on.
I just don't see how that's functional when every single member of the steering committee and every CAG member asks you not to.
We wasted like 3 steering committee meetings talking about it.
so Steph, I think wanted to respond to that.
Yeah, so I'd like to respond to that and to Ryan, your comment about talking about the statement of work. So in this phone call, Sabrina and I made that call, and you have every right to be frustrated about it. And if
I just think it's very unfair, and I feel like, we're not being heard. What was the point of first the impromptu meeting that we had, there were no meetings,
so
minutes taken.
the impromptu meeting, I was out of town and I wasn't able to be there in person and set this up. We were all very nervous about how this hybrid was going to work. So we didn't feel comfortable having a meeting if people couldn't participate online. So we decided it was better to wait until this month to do that. So we said, okay, let's not just skip it and cancel it. Let's do something informal, get together, bring people together, gather. I wasn't here. It sounded like that went really poorly, and I have received that feedback.
Well, it's not just that meeting, it's the fact here, just as the gentleman pointed out, we're already behind here, and now we have to be in a hurry to make important decisions that are way ahead of schedule, and we're not fully informed about. And then by the time the next meeting comes, they're already taking place. It's like it really disempowers the citizen input. I just don't see how it can be effective. And I don't know if it's actually living up to your mission, perhaps, as committees.
And that is actually, so I'm going to say something that I think the community is going to feel uncomfortable with, that I'm trying to redefine our goal as a community advisory group. I am the community involvement coordinator, and I do want to involve the community, and I want to acknowledge that Sabrina said it on the call, the decisions come from the EPA and we want input, and also we take the decisions based on the science and information we have. So I'm trying to balance those two things, and I'm not trying to be.
I mean, what's the problem?
Can you,
with getting
can
together?
we're getting a request from there.
Oh, I'm
Like,
sorry.
can I say that, please? Yeah, Paul in particular.
So I think I heard Paul say, it feels disempowering. It feels like, why is EPA making decisions that all the community members have asked not to make? And specifically, I think then your last comment was, decisions are being made and we don't have a chance for input on those decisions. I think Beth was a response to that saying, well, actually, these aren't decisions where we're asking and need CAG input, but I think even where, if I hear you right, Paul, it's not just where you all are looking for input on decision making, it's keep us posted as you go, and frustration with, even if there aren't decisions to be made, there are things happening and you all don't want to be hearing about it after the fact. You want to be able to be informed as things.
Yeah, it seems like we're running in arrears. That we're finding out after it's happened, and we don't have any input on the course of events. And even though we may not be able to determine the outcome, I think we would all like to have a voice in it.
Yeah. And if I can, sorry, I was trying to continue, and I know I see that we have 2 hands up over here. I think Nicole, I'm sorry, I'm trying to talk over there, but like look at you, so I'm sorry, I'm looking at you out of the side of my eye. Not trying to get that side eye. Something, a phrase that Sabrina and I have used when we talk about this. So this is not, we're not trying to be presumptuous about this, or we have put a lot of thought into it, and we have heard what you all are saying, and we're hearing that you're frustrated. I see Erica smiling. We have heard feedback, and like Ryan said at the beginning, we are trying something, and we hope that you can hear us out and see how this works. That this is a trial run to do this, right?
Are any other tags doing this?
So a lot of CAGs that I've seen meet quarterly, meeting monthly was rare. And so, sorry, I lost my train of thought. But we talk about bringing you all along as we're making choices so that you are informed and you know where you can get involved. And I think it's, Ryan has talked about facilitating at other Superfund sites. It's a tricky balance of being involved and also knowing that EPA makes a lot of the calls. So I wanted to just state that outright instead of going around in circles about it, that is something that we are trying to balance. And I see there's a lot of comments. I will pause and other folks speak, but just wanted to acknowledge that.
I wish that disclaimer would have come like 5 to 10 years ago. That's our upside. You're the first person saying it. You're the third person in that position that's been here since the beginning. So we've been getting a lot of lip service. It's not, I mean, you're being honest with us. So I commend you for that, but that should have been told to us as a community and as a group before we put away a decade of our lives in this.
Which statement are you talking about?
Just the fact that we have no power, that the EPA is going to make their decision, whatever their final decision is, final decision. We have no power as a CAG, we have no power as a community, we have no power as anything other than keep us quiet through this process via subcommittees and revitalization and all this stuff that we do on the side instead of dealing with the problem at hand, which was we've got a heavily contaminated neighborhood with lead and arsenic. And we've totally dropped arsenic from the conversation. And basically, I don't know, we've been told that we were here for a purpose and we're here to get the 99% people involved and so forth. But when it comes to it now, we have no power as a group or a community. So
I mean, one of the fallout of the experiment of quarterly meetings is that we have spent well over half our time in the last 4 or 5 meetings talking about this frustration. So I'm just naming that because here we are again, doing it. And for legitimate reasons, but I understand it. I see almost everyone's hands are up. So I don't know who hasn't spoken, but
I think it was Velma, then Aaron, then Terry, maybe Sabrina, but I think that was the order.
My stuff is on the too, so I'll be down until we get.
okay, and Eric has any 2 comments as well. Or questions. Velma, why don't you go ahead and then.
Well, or Terry, you can go, and then I'll go.
Well, all I'm gonna say is the reason why I've kept my mouth shut is because these guys have been having their ears burned by me for the last 4 or 6 months over these very topics. So I wanted them to hear directly from you. It isn't me making it up. And I think that these are serious issues. I went from day one, even though, Eric, we technically by law have no power. We've known that from day one. But we have had the ability to influence, and I think we've done a hell of a good job. And frankly, that influence has helped with the partnership for what, the working relationship we built between EPA and the community, EPA and CDPHE, to help move this project forward. Because when we were first knocking on doors, no one would answer. So it's come a long way. That has a lot to do with the fact of the partnership that we had here in this room. And one of the things that I have said is I believe that we feel to a large degree betrayed at this point, because we've given it our all. We want to finish it. And now we're kind of feel like we're being kind of parked at the corner, and we're definitely discounted. So several things that I have suggested, and I don't know if my fellow CAG members like them or not, but one of the things I've suggested is, in my business, if there's a dispute and you're not real sure what the heck it is, tell everybody to put their cards on the table. What exactly is the problem with meeting on a monthly basis? And then we'll go ahead and look at it from a business perspective. One of the things that I know is it is expensive. And if we're diverting money away from getting houses and property clean, none of us want to do that just for the sake of having a meeting. One of the things that I know, we've got a certain amount of turnover going on at EPA. And so there's limited resources of the ability for staff to actually do some of the things, at least that's what I understand, some of the things that they have been doing in the past. I get that. Those are all logical issues. We have issues as well. We have some outstanding questions. I've got some outstanding questions with regard to OU1, and it's possible that I just haven't been paying attention the last couple of years, which, it's always possible. But I would love to be able to get them out and get them discussed so that I have a comprehension level of where we're moving toward on OU1 is something that I'm comfortable with, that I can then turn to my community and say, yeah, we've done the best we can. And I, I feel like we're pretty close to that, but I don't feel that I'm there yet. OU2 to me is very similar to what we were going through OU1 in the beginning. We met on a regular basis just to make sure that we understood everything that was being done. So to me, bringing OU1 to a closure is a critical time, not to repeat everything over and over again, but it's a critical time to make sure that we're all comfortable, and any of our 2 cents that we'd like to throw in, we do have that opportunity to understand it and to throw it in. And so that's there. OU2 is just in the beginning stages. And so we desperately want to understand better and better and better. Sometimes it requires repetition. I'm in the political business as well as the law business, and everybody always says you have to repeat them at least 7 times as simple as possible for it to totally sink into everybody. Well, maybe that's what I need is some of this stuff to be repeated on OU2. But I'm anxious about it because we're at the front end side, and I'm extremely anxious about both OU1 and OU2 because of the fact that we're headed towards the coming to a crisp point on the revitalization question, which is the future of our town. Those are the reasons why I have said, if we can basically have EPA, and if CPHU wants to weigh in, God bless them, or even local health wants to break, bless it, issues of what are difficulties for them, great. If we then would, without emotions or attacking anybody, say, here's what we want to see, that's great too. And then we can see if we have a connection. If we don't have a connection, then we can try to negotiate things. Put all that out. Just a couple more things I want to say. I personally believe the more communication you have, the better. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean face-to-face communications. There are many types of communication. If we can figure out the types of communication that might be appropriate for certain types of questions, and that is acceptable, that's personally fine with me. Because I don't know about everybody else in the room. I got way too many meetings. I would love not to go to meetings, but I'm committed to making sure that the projects I work on work well. And so greater communication, talk about, is there a need to adjust the method by which we communicate? And how, Henry David Thoreau, simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. How do we make it as easy to understand? You guys deal in a very complex world. And I frankly think you do a good job trying to break that down and help us understand it. But we still need to have that simplicity and repetition for us to have a good ability to give feedback. There are remaining issues that we have talked about that we will probably never be able to resolve at this level. And that is because sometimes local EPA staff have to follow law and regulations, and they don't have any discretion. Decisions are made someplace else. In DC, in Congress, or DC and EPA, wherever, but they're made elsewhere. And these folks have to follow that. And so it's like going up and screaming at the young kid, high school kid that's selling you a hamburger, saying, I'm sick and tired of you raising the prices. That kid didn't raise the price of the hamburger, the kid sells hamburgers. So anyway, I'm talking too long.
I'm standing up because I'm recognizing that it's 7:15 and we are having, these are conversations that have been at the top of people's minds. I know Donna wants to speak. I know, I've taken the same notes several times. So we need to figure out something, right? And one of the things that maybe we can figure out, and Donna, I'm going to do next, is maybe we try at this next steering committee. We're meeting as a steering committee, which is most of you. This coming, in the next few weeks, next 3 to 4 weeks. What if that is all focused on OU2? It's all about updates on that, and then the next CAG meeting, which will be the next month, we come back to CAG, 2-hour CAG discussion on that is one possibility. I'm interested in Velma and what you have to say. So go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate the suggestion for the steering committee, but one of the points that we as and it's really frustrating. One of the things that's really frustrating and I'm not personalizing it, it's just really frustrating to present an issue on which virtually the entire CAG is unanimous. I mean, how often does that happen? And because we have such strong feelings about it, and because we feel it's a crucial and critical issue, and our responsibility as a CAG to bring it up because of that, we keep hearing, well, you all keep bringing this up. Well, because it's important, because we feel it's our role in the Superfund site is important. So community engagement and involvement are a part of any and all Superfund projects. I realize that we're an advisory committee. But as Terry said, this community has been heavily and intensively involved from the start, as you know, Sabrina, because you've been there. Virtually the entire time that I've been involved. If I can think of another time, well, I can only think of maybe 2, maybe 3 other times, and none of them like this, in which there was just basically an arbitrary decision being made. Fine, we know that CAG feels like this, but this is what's going to happen. And it's not something that I've experienced with either with Beth and especially not with our Superfund project team. I just haven't experienced that. It should be a part of the budget. It's a part of the responsibility of the Superfund team to engage with the community. This happens to be a community that has been very engaged from the start and has participated in the process from the start. And as Terry said, we have not necessarily won every point that we argued on, but we've made significant differences as time went on in terms of providing information and providing input and providing involvement that has made this project work so well. I have bragged on this CAG and our Superfund team in other CAG meetings that I've gone to, and when my friends call up and say our CAG is like only meeting quarterly and they won't talk to us and they just want to give us reports, and I brag on this CAG. And I said, gee, I'm sorry to hear that. That doesn't have to be the way it is. We have a Superfund team that interacts with us and values our opinions and seeks our opinions and frankly gets information that would not be available. Part of the environmental justice component of that EPA is increasingly emphasizing, and especially in terms of projects involving like lead and other high priority issues. Part of that environmental justice component is that it's a two-way street. Communities get dumped on because, in part, not only because they're vulnerable, but because agencies haven't sought and received the information that the community members could provide to them. Community history, industrial history, behavioral streams during certain kinds of weather. There are all kinds of technical details that agencies can get from communities when communities are treated with respect and as real participants in the process. So I'm speaking from the public health standpoint, but also from the community engagement and environmental justice standpoint. When I say we are already seeing the inadequacies of going to less often full CAG meetings. And I think part of the reason why the turnout is low tonight is partly because of uncertainty and what are we doing? Are we meeting? Are we not meeting? Where are we meeting? What are we doing? All of that uncertainty has been directly due to the attempt to enforce on this CAG a decision from the external from frankly, EPA works for is a government agency, works for the citizens, not the other way around. And so all of this confusion and so forth is directly resulting from essentially an arbitrary decision that, as yet, I have not heard an argument that really supported it. I do have a suggestion that might be a compromise, which is, and I might have mentioned it before, but I don't remember. I think that the CAG needs to have monthly meetings, but there's nothing that says we have to have monthly in-person meetings. And one of the arguments I've heard from CDPHE and EPA is not just the cost of preparing for the meetings, but the cost of bringing people down here. The cost of preparing for the meetings, I heard that first, we have to prepare reports, we have to get numbers ready, we have to do all this graphics. When we started complaining about not having monthly meetings, the answer was, why don't we do the reports for you instead? Well, I thought that's what you were complaining about having to do. So at any rate, so my suggestion would be, what about if you must have an in-person meeting, why not have an in-person meeting quarterly and full CAG virtual meetings on the other months? I like seeing y'all in person, you know.
I'd love
I
to,
don't need it.
I think that's a proposal on the table, and I think it's helpful to come up with, alternative solutions. I appreciate sort of people's ideas. And Vilma, for the record, I totally did not mean to minimize those comments. Part of what I was saying is to EPA, like, we really are having a hard time.
I didn't expect to work.
Okay, so I don't mean to minimize the comments. They have been coming up because they are very, very dearly held.
And I'm sorry for being a little sarcastic. I've been in a.
No, you're good. Okay, I just want to make sure we're
Yeah.
clear on that. So I feel like we're still grinding, right, on this. We're having a hard time getting to substance because people are feeling disrespected and feeling disempowered and feeling frustrated. And so I think we're gonna have to figure out something so that we can kind of restore the sense that, all right, we're doing that everyone can feel that way. And now obviously EPA, it needs to be able to work for you. So I think you're hearing lots of sort of attempts to find something that's workable, but it needs to work for you all too. And so, I mean, I think it's really helpful. My guess is it's really helpful when when people are kind, when people are open, when people ask questions that are, and can have the two-way communication. Like my guess is that is hugely important and helpful. And I think this is a good, to me, this is a great environment that I've been experiencing tonight. But I feel, I don't know if you have thoughts.
Well, I mean, I certainly, none of us on our team, and I think you probably all know it, want community members to feel like they're being set on the corner and ignored. That's not any of our intents. I think what we've struggled with, and I think kind of getting to we've talked about this over and over again, is feeling like we're not figuring out how to communicate effectively and make progress. But part of it is we want to figure out how to report status on things that are like new. We haven't really had a whole lot new, and it's been us working on things. So there is definitely the resource issue. Beth has 8 sites, for goodness sake. 8 sites. I have this one site. We'll be bringing Sydney up to speed. She's going to be fantastic and already knows a lot, but there's a lot going on administratively. That said, there's sort of that hard truth of, we have technical people, and at times they're not believed. Like, we have a total technical assistance branch that rocks, and state technical people that we bring in to help us develop how we think we want to characterize things. And right now, it's even from the contracting side, I can't share final details because it still has to go through negotiations, and it could change. So I have to work process and money, and we don't really know what the plan is. I can tell you what pie in the sky is, but it's subject to change. but that's part of that still, like, it's our process on how to characterize a site and then get to how we think the possible cleanup options will look. And along the way, all this other stuff is really important about reuse planning and technical assistance and having their assistance on sharing information and like helping you guys understand it and then provide us input on those things. But we can't go back and like reframe and redo how we're gonna do our technical work. That's our job. That's why we have people.
Yeah.
So
I-
just ask a direct question.
Yeah, 2, 3,
I
and
think we have probably some people on screen that might want to chime in too.
so Velma, direct question,
Clarification. Yeah.
clarification question, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm done ranting.
The ranting Velma has.
Clarification question, I understand what you're saying about the technical, looking at contracting and how they're, especially the contracting, there are aspects that you can't talk about till the contracts are wet.
Well, yeah, we could have a laundry list of tasks, and because we, like, right now, we're doing great money-wise,
Yeah.
but depending on how things come at us, it's like, nope, can't do that. Nope, can't do that.
I understand.
Like, and then it gets pushed off.
Yeah.
I don't want to commit and say, this is what we're doing, and then we're called liars and we can't do science.
No, I understand that, and I don't, that's not really my question. My question is, how is that different from the process that's been ongoing since?
Well, we
day
haven't,
one?
yeah, I think. I don't
That's
think that
always
we've
been
made
the way.
progress. It's been the same back and forth on issues that we haven't been able to figure out how to progress through. That is, I think that's been one of the toughest cruxes for me to figure out is I'm still trying to do all the things that I'd like to do to keep the site moving forward. On that, remembering it was a 5-year time frame, people wanted us to do this in. Okay. So we're trying to make
Counting COVID.
right. I mean, it's hard because we do really value community input. But it's hard at every single stage of this to just say, okay, let's wait. And if we don't have like a document to share, or it's not an official part of the process where we're having a public meeting with public comment, response to comments, I guess it's just trickier.
My original question of substance feeds right into this, so I mean, if I could ask them both. at the same
I
time.
feel like you should ask it, and we may not answer.
Yeah, you don't have to
today, but
answer
yeah.
it. My simple question, this is why we need meetings now. You said that we had additional funding. And we were originally, this is something I was gonna ask the water specialist today, which I couldn't, but we still went into that meeting. We did not like the fact that when they did quarterly, when they did the water temperature on OU2, they did water temperature testing. They did that like on a daily to figure out what the temperature is coming out for. But from my understanding, when they were doing the water coming out, they were doing a quarterly process. And it was told to us that by quarterly process, that meant that you were doing one water sample every 3 months. Well, so I guess the question is, since there's additional funding, are we getting better than quarterly testing on this is where our problems are, is the way the testing is being done and stuff, because this is a good year for it, because we're gonna end up with like twice our normal average rainfall and so forth, which means twice the average contaminants are flowing off of the open side pile.
And
Not
I
necessarily
do,
so.
Well, we don't know if we don't look.
But that's part of the balance. Like, I don't.
You're not looking.
No. So we don't have the resources to do 24 hours, like 24/7 sampling, or even like every single month sampling. So what is it that you do, and what is the normal scientific process for this sort of characterization?
Right.
Quarterly sampling is normal, typical, customary characterization methodology.
I want to interrupt 1 second to say that, Eric, you asked that question one of the last meetings we had when we talked about OU2 technical updates, and I talked with Sarah and the site team about that question. That was part of I think what they want to talk more about. and explain more about and give in context. So I feel like your question is, you know, is relevant to the substance of what we're going to talk about in YouTube. Sydney was going to chime in on it.
Well, I think Beth has been waiting to speak, so I'll let her go.
Okay,
Go ahead. So I have a couple of points, and I'm gonna try not to get disorganized and try to make eye contact while I'm talking to Al. Like first, I do appreciate this conversation. I think Ryan made the point that this has been really respectful, even though we are all pretty much disagreeing. So I do appreciate that, and I know that that's important to me, and I know it's important to the site team to feel that we can come here and talk about hard topics without feeling attached. So that's important to me, and that trust component, I think that's a part of that. The second part that I want to add, I may have come out the gate too hard, but Eric reiterated what I said, and I didn't mean to say no input. Absolutely not. That's not our goal. So I wanted to clarify. So I apologize if that's how it came across. There are processes that are defined by the scientific, like how we characterize groundwater. That is well defined within EPA. And so there are things that even when we get feedback on sampling every day, those are things we may not be able to change. And so trying to define the things that we can change, like if you guys tell me you want me to do something different for last fall, I can do that. I can go off and do that immediately. Not whenever I can, right? But when you ask us to change how we sample things, change where we sample things, we have had those listening sessions on OU2. So I'm trying to clarify that there are, the input is important to us. And so I wanted to acknowledge, I feel like I came across really aggressively, but I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I really value it. And I like my job. I like engaging with you guys. I want this to be successful. I hope that that's clear. So just trying to define it. And another, like my last component, and then I will be quiet. I think it is hard I'll just speak personally for me. It's hard when I come to meetings and I feel disrespected and I feel like when I feel like it's not a conductive meeting, when we have meetings where we show up and we're rated, when it feels like we're being berated over the same topic that we tried to explain, that's hard. And I think I know that I want us to have a good, trusting working relationship. And part of it has been, I have a lot of other work that I have to do. We're not taking away funding from other things. I have sites, and it's hard for us to prepare the presentations. It's hard for us emotionally to come to meetings where we don't feel like we're having a productive dialogue. This has been outstanding in my opinion. It's been tense, but it has been productive. And so just kind of redefine, like there are factors I want to address. You said, Donna, said that there are components of like, why can we not come to meetings, or why are we saying we can't come to meetings every month? It is, I think a lot of it is the presentation. The dialogue does not take us very long to prepare. If we want to have dialogue, that's easier. If you want a detailed presentation on something, that takes more time. So just to clarify those things, I think those are all of my points. I apologize for like getting a little distracted. Thank you all for letting me share.
I mean, I really do think that there may be a workable solution here, right? And going back to Donald's point and the idea that I think you all are asking more for dialogue than technical presentations oftentimes anyway, and that you also, I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but to Beth's point, what I hear is not that you all want decision-making power over things that are technical and they're EPA, sort of protocol data-driven things, but that you want to be in the comfort, you want to be engaged, you want to be updated, you want to be able to ask questions and state your concerns and provide input and have the kind of relationship where you can say, hey, are you doing that? Hey, are you taking into consideration the fact that it's a serious rain year? Can you, like, all of those, so that you can be reassured and or at times raise things that may not have been on the radar. So I think that's the kind of thing I'm hearing you all want. And I see some nodding heads.
Doesn't do any good. I mean, if in the end, the decision's already made, why that's what we've been doing this for the last 10 years.
I mean, that's in a way that's.
Basically, but I know it's not the best. Because we're not getting.
By which decision?
I'm just saying for all that, I just don't, I think that the openness with the community involvement has gone downhill every year since this project has started, as far as the need for community involvement with that. The desire to have community involvement. I mean, right now, like we've been told that the decisions are already made on how we tested this, how we test everything. This is a different facility than others when it comes to groundwater. It's very, you can't compare this to Lebanon. You can't compare this to other places because It's our, the way our groundwater interacts, and we're so close to the Arkansas River and everything, it's different, it's its own unique individual thing. So as a community, I guess I feel, and as a personal community, I feel we should be testing it differently because of it is different.
So.
And
can I
it
ask you a question?
just kind of goes back to where we have it all along. I mean, you're gonna find what you're looking for. So if we don't do air monitoring, we're not gonna find it. I'm not gonna, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna bring that stuff up anymore, but I'm just saying, it's a step in the process. We've gone through it with the indoor, the HVAC system. We've done this in multiple places in the process, and now I see it happening with you too. And we're basically told that I mean, it goes back to you're not a scientist.
Well, I have a question for you just about something you said, but Velma, you're kind of gonna, but do you wanna? Because I want to ask Eric something, but if you have something you want to say first.
Yeah.
And we are actually 3 minutes over.
Okay, yeah, just, it was kind of,
We should figure out how to close this out next week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do need to discuss that.
yeah, and it was just a quick, a follow-up on the,
Can I, before you do the follow-up? Okay,
just mine's just real quick,
okay,
just
yeah.
really quick, yeah, which is, you know, a lot of times when I don't agree with her that the public participation part has been steadily going downhill, but even though I feel like recently there's been the troubles we've been discussing. But I think that there have been times when we could have, there's still outstanding issues, as we all know, that we need to work through. And some of us are working together on some of that to try and help move some of those issues along, so there's less of a feeling of being stuck. But I think, especially when we were first meeting, almost every, and maybe it was necessary at the time, but almost every time the CAG raised a question or an issue, and mind you, we had a lot of learning to do. EPA or CDC very generously offered a technical report. Why don't, oh, we've got so-and-so, why don't we have them come and give you a technical report on this? Why don't we have somebody come and give you a technical report on that? The other thing. And I'm, you know, time passes and so does my memory, but it may be that some of the technical reporting, I mean, I was always glad to get technical reports, but and I learned a lot from them. But I know there were times when I felt like they might have been more than we really needed, even though they were appreciated and they were generous. So maybe we need to put more thought into when technical reports are suggested, maybe we as a CAG need to really do more thinking about what's good, what are we really going to hear more from you, like if you're suggesting a technical report, what are we going to learn from that? What questions is that going to answer? And is it really worth your staff time to put together a whole technical report when maybe it's just a few questions that we don't quite understand?
Well, and I mean, that's where utilizing task is
Utilizing
using treat with the technical assistance support.
yeah.
And I think Sydney wants to step in, and I want to
Call it a call. Yeah.
Thank you for having me back. Sorry.
No, it's
I just had a couple of quick comments. You know, on OU2, it's going to be a longer process. We talked about 10 years to get it done, and so the hurry that you were referring to for OU1, of course, is perfectly appropriate, but we have much more time to do our due diligence here on OU2, make sure that we know what's going on there. Large part of our concern is future use of OU2, and that's where we need to, you know, as a community, have more interface with what's going on and the level of remediation that gets, you know, that takes place there based on what the community has in mind for the future use. So that's why we would like to be involved in that. As far as the testing protocols, I don't think everybody on the CAG has a problem with that. I think most testing protocols are probably all well established, and if there's something we're going to have to live with. You guys will decide on the level that they get applied, but once that they've come in and you've established that that's where it is, that's fine with it. I think we're more concerned about conceptually how the whole project turns out and what our input is into it.
It's really early. I appreciate all of that input, Paul. I think that's also a big question for us, and getting the right people to the table. This idea of reuse planning, we didn't really get to broach that tonight, so that'll be, I guess, next up. And see where we are with that. And, you know, I think we shared that there is reuse support or similar visualization stuff like we did earlier for early one, and keep things going. But part of it sort of relates to Sarah Ray's conversation too, of we've got private property owners who may have interests in what they want to do with the short term, you know, in the short term with their property. And then there might be other conversations from a like local champion perspective that you all are having perhaps without agency people that might cut other things, other possibilities loose, right?
Those
So,
are all reasons to talk.
no, I get it. So it may not be that we've got so much technical, but we may also not have a whole lot that we're doing yet. And so we can get into this reuse planning.
Yeah, my sense, I mean, I do, in the spirit of wrapping up, I feel a number of things about tonight's discussion. What part of it is just that it's actually really helpful to just be together and have this conversation in person. And that obviously this conversation is still live and there's still some thinking that needs to be done, and, you know, tweaking or whatever changes that need to be done to the proposals that have been floated over the past couple of months. So I think my suggestion is we do that. Some of the suggestions I've heard is how to ease the load on EPA and also make these meetings consistently, you know, cooperative and kind and productive and respectful, and so that people leave feeling energized and good about their jobs and their work and their participation as community members in the time that people are giving. So I think that,
Two
yeah,
quick comments.
Yeah.
I like what Beth said about, you know, maybe sometimes we just want dialogue. I think you're absolutely right. And it, rather than we ask a question, then you have to do a whole lot of work for presentation. Dialogue will help us narrow down what we need, more technical things on and presentations. And the second thing on Sabrina, I've heard that you guys have said before, you haven't felt like we're making progress. I got a sneaking feeling you define progress differently from the way we do. And so maybe that's one of our communication issues. And that's okay. I mean, we can figure that out on how are you defining progress? How are we defining progress? Sometimes we define progress as simply having a conversation. Oh, I get it now. And so maybe that's how we define progress, but just wanted to throw those two things out. And I love what you just said. What can we do to soften the load on you guys, knowing that you have practical ways to problems to get things done, but still be able to keep us engaged and have the conversations that we want to have.
okay. So it's clear to me that we need to have a more dedicated conversation on reuse. Both for you two. The other piece, sorry, Dorina. And okay. Yeah, and also that we need to do some thinking about, you know, we need to be able to like move forward on such a conversation and have people at least feel okay with like an experiment without having to just, you know, continue to have people spend time, need to spend time on the process stuff. It's hard on everyone, but thank you for everyone's comments and honesty. And
So can we have a full CAG meeting hybrid? I mean, a full CAG meeting virtually next month?
I think we're gonna stick with what's proposed for having a tag in October, but I just wanted to remind that obviously we're always open for emails or calls, or the communication line is not closed just because we're not here in
I know, but
person.
that's not the whole community. I mean, what we're talking about is whole group involvement. If I can email you and ask you a question anytime, but also I'm gonna do that interaction.
How about revisiting with the city?
Yeah, that's why I was asking, can we please have it?
With some ideas that from us that other solutions. I don't like to before they're done.
so that's some of the solutions I've heard that appeal to you all as community members is dialogue-based conversation, not having to have meetings that necessarily require substantive topic presentation. Having other means, and Terry's comment of having other means to exchange and discuss information about the meetings. I think it's just, you know, my sense of call to your and wellness question about next month is, I mean, I will certainly follow up with you all and see.
Right.
My sense is at this point, that
I mean, it could be virtual. I'm happy to do virtual.
and we have a steering committee meeting, which is most of you. So if maybe I'll talk with the EPA team and see, but at the minimum,
It's a much smaller mailing
Virtual.
list, but
is what?
it's a smaller mailing list.
At a minimum, it's a smaller group, but maybe we can extend it to 2 hours. Maybe we can actually get into substance
The
under
steering committee, no, I'm
maybe we can.
willing to spend 2 hours on the steering committee, and then when what I really want is a okay meeting.
And so I think it would be helpful at some point to talk about for the CAD, for you all, CAD members, community members, what's meaningful, and not right now. But what's meaningfully different for you all about steering committee meetings and CAD meetings that makes it so important?
Because one
No,
is-
but not this stuff now, but I think. in
The
general.
small group of people, and the other is the community notification list.
I think that's the
Simple.
main,
That's very
Can
simple.
we have a facilitated CAG meeting without if the EPA and the state decide they don't want to show up,
I don't,
can we still have a?
Yeah,
can we
I
have a
think we're
meeting?
gonna- okay, so that's.
No, I'm just saying, I'd love to do that, and then we just can, that's where we'll just, I mean, get word out to the community and get more community involved. So that way, when we come to our quarterly, we'll have a lot more people here with more to say.
Okay, well, I think throwing that into the mix, correct?
I was just wondering. if that's-
So I think that's the next step, is we don't know the answer to Donald's question. I don't think, Donna, I don't think we know the answer to your question. I am not
When
hearing.
is our next steering committee or post this meeting?
It needs to be scheduled. Usually it's the Monday after, but hang on one second, because I know that many of you are clear that you don't want steering committee meeting is insufficient for you. I hear it. And at the very minimum, we're having a CAG meeting in October, and that's, I think, what's known at this point. And it's a question mark, I think.
If somebody needs help designing an agenda, I'm a demon at designing agendas. You know, any way I can help, but I think, I mean, we're talking about EPA being too overworked to come and talk to the whole community in a CAG meeting. I mean, we're symbolically talk to the whole community in a CAG meeting, but they want to come to a steering committee meeting instead.
No,
Why not?
no, it was the.
I mean, you are coming to the steering committee meetings anyway.
Velma, I really think you are putting it out there loud and clear, and I think you need to give people a little time to like process and talk and hear what you have to say. And it's been really, I think it's clear.
It's been.
Yeah.
New.
I mean, we've gone really long, we need to close. I think we're gonna close and we'll meet next month at a minimum. But we don't quite know how, and we'll meet in October as a CAG for sure. And we're gonna frame up these topics and figure out how to, what we wanna spend time on. I will begin talking to you guys about how we wanna do that. So, let's close, and then if people wanna continue sort of talking on the side to brainstorm this, let's do. But let's close the formal meeting.
With the big group.
With the
vote.
big. All right, thanks everybody on the phone. Thank you for bearing with this extra 15 minutes. Thank you. And
I don't know how long.
Good meeting.
Yeah. Your question, you guys can have CAG meetings without EPA present. You're, you know.